Thanks, dear friends, for the world. You may be just a teacher, but for your students, you are the heroes. So I would like to call another hero of the educational field from Australia, and I would like to welcome our next presenter, Mr. Imtiaz Bughio. He is presently a school leader in Adelaide, Australia. In Pakistan, he has worked as a lecturer and a teacher's trainer. He specializes in curriculum development, teaching English and mentoring teachers. I would like to request Mr. Imtiaz Bughio to please share your valuable thoughts with us. So welcome, sir, in the Teacher Leadership Summit 2021, Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future. Over to you, Sir Imtiaz.
Well, thank you very much. I just would like to know if I'm audible. Can you please write down A in the chat box to tell me that I'm an audible, please? Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, the next request I would like to make is, can you please write down yes if you are able to see the PowerPoint presentation on your screen, please? Very good. All right, so here we go. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Imtiaz, all the way from Adelaide, Australia. I don't know how many of you are already there, but I can see some faces, some chat messages. I think that is the norm today, so I'll continue like that. Yes, I worked as a teacher trainer back in Hyderabad, but I also worked with the Beacon House school system, the city school. I was a principal of the city school Jinnah campus for a couple of years. I worked as a teacher for Beacon House for about 6 years. Here in Australia, I'm a teacher trainer. I mentor teachers and I specialize in training teachers on explicit teaching of functional grammar and genre writing. Yes, so first of all, congratulations to Nurul Huda Education Private Limited for organizing such an excellent conference. I got to listen to some veteran presenters like Saira Abbas Hussain. Yesterday, once my colleague Kashif Malik, and yes, it was an honor to hear them. My thanks are also due to Ma'am Rafia Mudassar for giving me this opportunity to speak to this August gathering. Here we go. All right, so my topic today is explicit teaching of functional grammar and genre writing. Now, this topic is actually a snapshot of extended work that we do over the years, and I'll quickly put this into context that how we do it, what we do, and so on. If there are any questions, please hold them with you. Maybe we can answer them later, or there are a few things that we will discuss as we go. All right, so let's unpack a few terms in my title. One is explicit teaching, the other is functional grammar, and then genre writing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, explicit teaching of genre writing is a systematic, sequential, and direct teaching strategy. When we teach explicitly, we use Pearson and Goller's gradual release of responsibility model. I'll talk about that model as well and how we use that model in order to teach genre, teach certain text types. Okay, this is what the gradual release of responsibility model looks like, as given in Fisher and Frey's work. It starts with the teacher who says, I do, and then teacher and students do it together. Then the students do it together. Then the student is able to do it independently. This was something new and something very effective that I not only learned, but also practiced and then mentored teachers using this gradual release of responsibility model. Um, as we go, you will see that this gradual release of responsibility model is very effective when we teach students story writing or persuasive text and so on. All right, so then there's a functional grammar. Functional grammar focuses on how language is used, that is, on the functions of language. Beverly Daravianka says that Michael Holliday's systemic functional grammar describes the relationship between grammatical forms and its functions. All right, so before we move on to this is how the functional grammar looks like. It focuses on three main areas: field, tenor, and mode. The field is what is going on in the text. Tenor is the roles, relationship, and communication of the participants, communication of a writer with the reader, communication of the characters or people within the text. And then finally, a mode. What is the mode of communication? All right, so genre writing, genre represents how writers typically use language to respond reoccurring situations. They point out to the fact that texts are most successful when they employ conventions that other members of community find familiar and convincing. Now, before we talk about this, these are a few um, genres or text types that we do over the years in our school. The complexity of the text increases as we go up in the years, and the complexity of the students' writing increases at the same time. It provides students intellectual stretch in their writing and the use of functional grammar and text structure. Before I move on to this, I would like you to please take 1 minute and think about, how did you learn writing? How did you learn to teach writing? Or how do you write teaching? How do you teach writing story or a persuasive text? This particular session is although relevant to writing more. However, I would go back to Sir Abbas Hussein's talk and pick one important quote that he quoted from Office Studies, an essay written by Sir Francis Bacon, where he says, reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. So re-quoting Sir Abbas Hussain quoted Sir Francis Bacon, but I would like to add something to it, that there's one more equally important skill that we need to learn and teach, and that is listening. It is important that we teach students listening skills as we teach reading and writing. Similarly, speaking as well. What I have observed over the years of teaching back in Pakistan, most of the times our focus is writing, because our examination is conducted through writing. The other is reading, and then speaking and listening is not given equal importance. In your chat box, because I just want to connect with you, can you please write down how much time or what percentage of teaching do you give to speaking and listening? Speaking out of 100, like reading, writing, speaking, listening, how much time do you give to speaking and how much time do you give to listening when you teach students? Can you quickly write down in the chat box so that I know I'm talking to people, please? All right, in the chat box, how much time do we give to teaching? 30% to speaking, 50% to speaking and listening. So we're talking about speaking and listening. So how much time to speaking and how much time to listening? Very good. So skills are integrated in teaching, Thyra says. Speaking 15%, listening 15%, writing 10, speaking 10, 30%. Thank you very much, Ashraf. Thank you very much. 30. Very good. Reading 40, speaking 10, listening 10, 40. That's what I thought. Yes, very good. Thank you, Soha. Akib says 30, 40, 50% for speaking, 20% for listening. Okay, 10% for listening. Thank you very much. I stop it here and then let's go back to this. Do we teach listening explicitly, or is it an embedded element of our teaching? Usually what happens is when we teach writing or teach anything, we talk to the students listen, and we think that's how teaching listening takes place, or speaking takes place. Through this explicit teaching of genre writing, we also use speaking as an explicit form of teaching. So I will use this teaching and learning cycle to focus on how we teach genre writing students. And this focuses on not only writing, but reading and speaking at the same time. As I mentioned earlier, this presentation is a quick snapshot. I'll be talking about lots of terminology as we use it in our schools here. However, if you have any questions, please post them on the chat box. I'll try to answer that. Otherwise, I'll give you some time at the end to ask me questions if it's possible. Yes, and as I said, it mentioned earlier, this teaching and learning cycle has talking to learn. Talking to learn is embedded throughout this teaching and learning process. And we use this talking to learn throughout this process of teaching. And it takes about sometimes 7 to 10 weeks to teach one particular genre. It depends on the time and the genre as well. Okay, so how do we teach talking to learn? We talk to the students about certain types of talks that we need to use, and we talk about it very explicitly. We talk to students about what the monologic talk is and how they can use monologic talk in their communication with the students and the teachers. Dialogic talk, we explicitly talk about this importance of a dialogic talk in our teaching and learning process. Then it is an expository talk. So it's not just the talk randomly. We focus specifically on these different types of talks. And these different types of talks, there's a literature behind it. There's a lot has been said about it. Paulo Freire in 1972, in his book, Pedagogy of Oppressed, he says that leaders who do not act dialogically, but insist on imposing their decisions, do not organize the people, they manipulate them. They do not liberate, nor are they liberated, they oppress. So we have to encourage this dialogic conversation. We need to talk to the students dialogically. We need to teach them how we can be very good speakers. At the same time, we need to explicitly teach them how we can possibly be active listeners. That's very important to learn. My understanding from my experience back in country is that we do not explicitly talk about teaching, listening and speaking skills. So I think this time we should start thinking about it. Yes, how we can talk about improving listening skills is talk to the students. For example, in a dialogic talk, it is important when one person speaks, other person listens to it very actively. And when the conversation from one person is finished, the other person takes turn and talks about it. So it's not only just listening passively, it is listening actively so that you are able to respond to the person's conversation or a talk. And if this is a very important skill that we need to teach and learn at this at any stage, although but we must teach it at schools where the students need to take turn to be quiet and listen actively, attentively, and then take turns to talk, build up on the talk of their colleague. So this teaching and learning cycle emphasizes that we need to learn to talk and talk to learn. After that, this assessment. Assessment is also an embedded element throughout this teaching and learning cycle that we use for teaching genre writing. We assess speaking, we assess this dialogic talk, we assess students' listening skills. At the same time, when we assess students' writing, first we take their diagnostic test, which is a pre-assessment or pre-intervention assessment. After that, formative assessment, which goes throughout these 7 to 10 weeks, how the students are developing, learning bits by bits. All right, and then it's a summative assessment. At the end of this teaching and learning cycle, we ask students to produce a piece of work which is as good as we expected them to write. Okay, and there we go. The first stage of teaching and learning cycle here is building knowledge of the field. Before we start teaching any genre, any text type, or before we start teaching story writing, before we start teaching a persuasive text or an expository text, before we start teaching an information report or an explanation, it is important that we build the knowledge of the field of that particular topic and the genre we are teaching. And we can use multimodal text, not only the text, not only the papers, not only that, we can introduce certain books which refer to the same topic or the same type of writing. Pamphlets, blogs, videos, brochures, movies, podcasts, name it. In any way, if it is possible, expose your students to uh, the text type and the topic that we are talking about. And this is a key that before we start talking about the topic, we need to give students exposure to that topic. There's a Sarwat Jahan's question: how can we pursue to teach students listening skills? See, when we teach speaking skills, we need to teach listening skills at the same time, because we need to ask students to be active listeners. For that, we can give students certain worksheets which they fill in while they are listening. We ask students to respond to the conversations that their colleagues are doing, their peers are doing, or we ask students to be attentive and answer the question at the conversation, after the conversation, or a monologic talk of a teacher, or a dialogic talk of students. So building the knowledge of the field is the first key area that we need to build on. And then we talk about supporting reading. Now, along with a multimodal text, we need to introduce a model text. Now, this model text, I'm not sure if it is already used in the context of Pakistan teaching, because when we teach students story writing, we need to show students one story. And that story should be pitched at the same level, year level, as the students are. And that model text will be referred to every time we teach students a particular aspect of a story writing. If we want students to learn a setting or character development, or we talk about plot, or a rising action, or a falling action, or a climax, or resolution of the problem in the story, we need to refer back to this model text and tell students, this is what is expected of you. This is how the tension rises. This is how the climax is reached. This is how the falling action happens. This is what the resolution, the first resolution, second resolution, and the third resolution. If you want these students to learn these all three different types of resolutions in the story, you need to present them through the model text, which is as good as could be produced by the students in that level. We should also introduce students to a mentor text. Mentor text is actually pitched above students' year level. So we should ask students to stretch their ability to write a story, and they could write a story even beyond their year level. If their students are in year 5 or 6 or 7, they should be able to write that story at the year level 8 or 9. But then the students need to see that story. The students need to see those elements, those important elements in the story, before we expect them to write. And when we support students with reading, we need to use different strategies of reading, maybe modeled reading. We need to tell students how they should read. We should model how reading happens. We should have a shared reading, a guided reading, or collaborative reading. The students should sit together, read to each other the model text, the mentor text, or the multimodal text, and learn from those texts with colleagues. And then the students should also be able to read the text independently. The next stage of this, after we have built the knowledge of the field, after we have supported students with reading, although the supporting reading we can go through the process, now it's time for students to the sir mentor text. Can step down also, Saira Rahman, model text is actually pitched at the student's year level. Mentor text is a step up. So if the students are exposed to a model text, that simply means the students are expected to write as good text as it is. A mentor text is one step up, and that should have better language conventions or authorial choices that we ask students to write. Now, this is a very important. The third stage of teaching explicit writing is deconstruction of the model text. So once you have the model text, the students have read it, the students understand it. Now it's time to deconstruct it. Deconstruct that model text for various lenses. Deconstruct the model text for persuasive devices, or literary devices, or character, or setting. Talk to the students through that model text, that this is how the writer has used these persuasive devices and argument text. This is how the writer has used literary devices like metaphor, simile, onomatopoeia, you name it. And this is how the writer has used sentence structure in this model text. And this is how we expect you to produce one. We should also show students how the writer has been able to connect with the audience, what words, what language, what sentence structure, what ideas the writer has used to connect to the audience. Text structure, what is the beginning of the story, what is the in the beginning of the exposition. Talk to the students through that model text. If you look at the model text through each lens every time, you would see that your students would not worry about the content of the text. They would be learning this skill, how it has been incorporated in writing. So deconstructing that model text is important through various lenses. This is another important stage of writing. After deconstruction of the text, now this is very important. I'm not sure how many of us back in Pakistan actually do it, but we must do it. And that's joint construction. And this joint construction means the students and teachers sit together and write a story. The students and teachers write a persuasive text. The students and teacher write an information report together. Now, therefore, we call it joint construction. Through this joint construction, teacher would tell students how they can incorporate authorial choices in their writing, how they can use language conventions in their writing, what is the best text structure they could have, what are the sizzling starts they can introduce in their story, what are the persuasive devices and how they can use in those devices. So this important joint construction. So the students and teachers create one similar text. Yes, I understand. That's what is missing back in Pakistan. What we do is we always teach students and we ask students to reproduce it. We teach students, we ask students to reproduce. Let's take some time to do it together. The students and teachers should do it together. The students and teachers should do some research around the topic and start establishing it. And how we can possibly do it? We can use modeled writing, shared writing, guided writing, collaborative writing. All these elements can help us produce a joint construction. You can ask students to think about a topic sentence for a paragraph in a persuasive text on a particular topic. Yes, joint construction can also be in the form of group or pair work. Exactly. So what you should do, you should ask students to collaboratively prepare one topic sentence or one paragraph, and then they can share that paragraph to the entire class and teacher can help them. Other students can give their feedback to improve that paragraph. That's doing together. So the student did that joint construction together for one paragraph, say the orientation in a story. They share that orientation with the entire class. The entire class gives feedback for improvement. Teacher gives feedback for improvement. Once the orientation is done, let's talk about the rising of the problem. And this is where the students would see how they should write, and along with writing, the editing process will also go on. So the students would know this is what they need to avoid, this is what they need to do. And after this joint construction, this is joint construction is the most important element, because the students will see how they can write. And here you can also see that the students who need differentiated support during the class can also come up with some brilliant ideas that we may not be able to do. Yes, so peer correction is also possible during this joint construction with the whole class. It's the whole class feedback. So not only the whole class feedback, but teachers' feedback at the same time. So after the students do one paragraph, say for example, we are writing an exposition or a persuasive writing on a particular topic, starting with introduction, argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, argument 4, and the conclusion. So the students and teachers should do it together. The students and teachers should build it together. And the students should see how it is done. The students should see how it is edited and proofread. How students should see how it is improved. So this joint construction is a key element that we need to focus on. And the next one is independent writing. Now, just imagine we go back to building the knowledge of the field. So first we asked students, we gave students lots of knowledge about the topic as well as the genre that we are writing on. Second, we supported students with lots of multimodal texts, and we provided students a model text that we focused every time we looked at it. We provided students a mentor text with that. And then we started deconstructing the text using various lenses. And once we deconstructed the text, students were able to see what kind of sentences we use in this, what kind of noun groups do we use in a story, what kind of complex sentences do we use, why do we use simple sentences in a story, and when and where, how has the writer used it. After that, we show them through our joint construction. After this whole process, now the students are able to write independently. Now, this independent writing, as was mentioned earlier, collaboratively creating success criteria. Now it's time for the students and teacher to work together and see what your story should look like. What should your story have? What are the elements that we expect in your story? Let's talk about it. So the students we can start with saying, okay, let's look at the text structure. What text structure should we have in our story? We should have orientation, a problem, and resolution. What should we have in an orientation? The character, the setting, the where and the when, the who. And then the problem. Should we mention the problem immediately, or we should rise to that problem and reach to the climax? All these should be the part of the students and teachers collaboratively created success criteria. Please remember that if you work with the students, if you put students at the front of your teaching and learning process, you would see that their ownership increases, their connection to learning improves. Please do not bring all that knowledge from outside and to the class. Tell students to create that need for learning. Tell students to give you that idea of what to learn, how to learn as well. Keep them as a partner in a teaching and learning process. So this collaboratively creating success criteria is another element where the students would feel their ownership, that connection with what they are writing. For example, after the students has written um, um, an introduction in a persuasive text, you should have a success criteria. I have included the problem. I have introduced the problem. I have introduced my point of view. I introduced a thesis statement with at least 3 big ideas into it.
Imtiaz,
Yes, please.
uh, sorry to interrupt you, but we are over time now, and the next speaker is in line waiting. So can you just wind it up?
I'll do that. Yes, I'm nearly done. So this is wow, and this is what I looked at as I said it. And the teachers should provide a feedback to the students' final draft. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I come to an end of my presentation. I would say thank you. I'm certainly excited about what I'm talking about. And because this is what my bread and butter is, this is what I do every day.